Almost 20 years ago now, on a visit I made to Colombia, I met a person who's become a very good friend of mine named Francisco Lopera, who lives in the city of Medellin in Antioquia. And he told me about some families there that have Alzheimer's disease. It's a very different kind of Alzheimer's. It's an Alzheimer's that begins at about age 49. And not only that, it's inherited from generation to generation. So if the person's mother has it, the children have a 50% chance of getting the disease. Or the same if the father has it. The children have exactly the same chance. And because the families there are quite large, often we see families with 12, 15 children. As many as half of the children could be developing Alzheimer's disease if one parent has the disease. From our research, we know that this very serious form of Alzheimer's disease is actually caused by a mutation in a gene. That there is a gene called presenilin that has a mistake in it. That's what we mean by a mutation. They live in an area, as I mentioned, called Antioquia, that is one of the states in Colombia that extends up toward the Panamanian border, and its capital is Medellin, where some of the families live. This is a very large family. It consists of about 5,000 individuals. They don't even necessarily know that they're related to each other. Some of them are fifth, sixth cousins. But we know that they're all related because they all share a mutation that can only have arisen from one single individual many generations ago. And here you see their family trees, just a small portion. If I were to show you their entire family tree for all of these families, it would fill the walls of this entire room. After several years of studying this family, in collaboration with Alison Goat, we were able to determine the cause of their early onset Alzheimer's. They have a mutation in a gene called presenilin. A gene is made up of many letters called nucleotides, and they encode a protein. In this case, the protein is called presenilin, and they have one mistake in their gene presenilin that results in a change of an amino acid from a glutamic acid to an alanine at position 280 in this protein. And that mistake, with which they're born with, results 40, 45 years later in Alzheimer's disease. People there that have this problem. It's over 3,000 people that live in a number of small villages in Antioquia. Many of them are in Medellin, but some of them live as far away as Yarumal, Angostura, Moron, a number of places that are in the countryside, in which we have to travel 5-6 hours to get to. And these people are all related to each other. They all share the same gene, but they may be related in quite a distant way, third, fourth, fifth cousins. How did his family get this condition in the first place? And what we did was we took DNA from about 70 or 80 individuals that all had the mutation, sequenced the DNA right through the site where the mutation is, and we align every one of those bars that you see up there. Each one of those horizontal lines is an individual's DNA sequence. And the mutation is lined up right there under that letter B. They all have the mutation, so they all have exactly the same nucleotide, that mistake right there. It all lines up perfectly. But notice that a lot of other DNA around the mutation also lines up. How could it be that everybody with this mutation has a whole stretch of DNA that's exactly identical to each other? This is definitive proof that the origin of this mutation must have come from a single individual, because only one individual could have given rise to exactly the same long stretch of DNA in which every single one of the letters is identical. Among us, there's much more difference in the DNA between each of us in this room. So we knew there was a founder effect here. That's called a founder effect, when the origin comes from a single individual. We also know that in Colombia, the people are called an admixture. The Spanish invaded around the time of Christopher Columbus and a few decades thereafter. And they had offspring with the indigenous Amerindian people, so that the current population of Colombia is made up of a maternal lineage that consists mainly of DNA that comes from Amerindian women, and a paternal lineage that comes from the conquistadors that came over with Christopher Columbus and his subsequent conquistadors, all of them, that were all males that came to South America and Central America. So we see this admixture in the population. And when you have offspring, the DNA gets mixed up. You see here, here's our chromosomes up there, and there's a thing called recombination. So you get a little chunk from your mother, and then you get a little chunk from your father, and then your mother, and it goes back and forth here, so that the DNA along the chromosomes is a mixture from both parents. And we can ask the question, did the mutation come from an Amerindian woman or from one of the Spanish males? So we looked at the sequence around the mutation, and we did a thing that's called painting the chromosome, in which we look at all of the markers on the chromosome, in the DNA, that tend to be letters that are a little bit unique in people of Spanish origin, and compared it to letters that tend to be a little bit unique in people that are of Amerindian origin. And it turns out that all of the markers, by markers I mean changes in the nucleotides, the DNA, around the mutation were all of Spanish origin. Clear evidence that the mutation came probably from one of the Spanish conquistadors. Maybe from one of these guys. We don't know, of course, who the individual is, but it's very likely that the individual came over sometime after 1500, and his offspring resulted in this entire population with Alzheimer's disease today.
What we learn from the people that are getting Alzheimer's there is applicable to all of us. These people have a severe form of the disease, but otherwise it's exactly like Alzheimer's in everybody else, other than its early onset. And if we can find a treatment there in these very special cases, it's very likely that what we learn from the people in Colombia will be applied to people around the world. These people are really not just helping themselves, but they are extremely instrumental for advancing the whole field of Alzheimer's disease internationally.